Employees of some of the biggest tech companies on earth, Google, Apple, Microsoft, and Intel, are now actively speaking out against the discrimination that they and others face while at those big tech giants. This is not something entirely new. The Lunduke Journal has been covering the massive anti-white, anti-male, and sometimes anti-Asian discrimination that many of these big tech companies employ. What is new and interesting is how comfortable many current and former employees are now feeling in openly speaking out against some of the crazy racist discrimination and sexist discrimination that Google, Apple, and others are employing within their organizations. I'm going to run you through just a couple of them that appeared just over the last 12 hours or so. This is quite a few. This one from Sean McGuire posted this over on X. Quote, "I was told I can't be promoted for being a white man explicitly at Google." Now, Sean McGuire isn't some random run-of-the-mill guy. This isn't some anonymous dude. He's a partner at Sequoia Capital, heavily involved in investments in SpaceX and a whole lot of other companies. So this is him coming out and saying this is kind of a big deal. And then there's this gentleman who is a, quote, senior director from Intel Corporation, retired. He retired from Intel a few years ago. Quote, this is from Russell. "And at Intel Corporation, we restricted hiring white males unless approved at a senior VP level, and that was 10 years ago. Imagine what it's like now." Seriously. So if you wanted to hire a white male at an upper VP level at Intel, you had to get approval, not extra approval, not because of it being a VP position, but because it was a white guy. That's crazy. Here's one from a gentleman named Levi Thomason. Quote, "I was told I'd love to hire you, but unfortunately, you're a white male." This was at Microsoft. Said in honesty as they were forced to take non-whites first. Now, who is Levi Thomason? Well, he's a principal software architect at Microsoft and has been for almost the last 7 years. So the fact that he feels comfortable speaking out about this, it shows a dramatic shift in the public narrative and in what's happening inside these companies. Here's another one from Dan Held. "White males are actively discriminated against in tech. It's an open secret of Silicon Valley. Had a brilliant upper 1% talented friend at Facebook be told, quote, he didn't fit the demographic, end quote, for management." You didn't fit the demographic. You have to have a certain demographic for management. And Dan goes on to say, had another at Airbnb win a $10 million lawsuit for discrimination. Now, who is Dan Held? Well, he used to work at Uber, and he currently is at Asymmetric. Now, these are all people who are speaking out and willing to put their reputations on the line and potentially their employment on the line to speak out against massive anti-white, anti-male, and sometimes anti-Asian discrimination at these big tech companies. Now, here's another one from Andreas Kling. Now, who is Andreas Kling? Well, Andreas Kling used to work at Apple, worked at Apple for about half a decade or more, used to also work at Nokia, but you may mostly remember him as the guy who's running and founded the Ladybird web browser project. Andreas says, quote, "One of the last meetings I attended before leaving Apple in 2017 was management asking us to, quote, keep the corporate diversity targets in mind, end quote, when interviewing potential new hires. The phrasing was careful, but the implication was pretty clear. I knew in my heart this wasn't wholesome, but I was too scared to rock the boat at the time." And I've heard so many stories of this where people will reach out to me and they'll say, Lunduke, I experienced in a meeting where we were talking about hiring some new candidates, and it was implied very heavily that we needed to not hire a white man for the position, but it wasn't written down in an email, it wasn't in a corporate document, so I don't know what to leak to you, because people try and leak stuff to the Lunduke Journal. I get this regularly. I've heard this from several people at Apple over the years, where Apple is very hesitant hesitant to write these policies down, but it is apparently prevalent throughout the organization where they are trying heavily to make sure they hire fewer white people, especially white male. And some of the companies have specific policies along those lines for Asians as well. So people from China or Japan or Korea. Now, again, this is nothing entirely new. The Lunduke Journal has been reporting on this for quite some time. You may remember the instance where Netflix managers, quote, will not hire this white guy because we have too many white people, end quote. That's a quote from a person who used to work at Netflix and is now a fairly prominent YouTuber by the name of Primogen. And also there's the big story, the IBM and racist whistleblowers, right? All of the leaks that came out of IBM and Red Hat, basically some of the largest tech companies in the world, and in case of Red Hat, the largest Linux company in the world, where they literally had training. They have training programs and slide decks to teach people how to discriminate against white people. They literally have training, and you can go through. I published the entire slide decks, the whole gosh darn thing with the speaker notes, every single slide, all of it, referenced every which possible way and verified that they literally had decks, slide show upon slideshow about how white people were bad and the different adjectives you could use to describe how evil white people are, and then adjectives that were good to describe non-white people. It was crazy. They said things like, quote, whites feed and thrive on power at the expense of other races. It was nuts. IBM even had people take an anti-white pledge and try to get allyship, meaning non-white ally badges. And they tied executive pay raises and bonuses to hiring non-white people. So if you hired less white people, you got a bonus to your executive salaries. It was absolutely nuts. And people inside the company spoke up. They tried to be whistleblowers internally. IBM and Red Hat both had internal systems where people could anonymously report ethics violations, right? And so I received multiple reports from people, and I published some of them, so you can go check out the screenshots and everything, where employees at Red Hat said, whoa, I'm seeing a lot of racist hiring practices where you're saying flat out, we won't hire these white people, we will only hire non-white people. And they're like, that's illegal. And that's unethical, and that's just immoral. That's awful. That's crazy racism. You don't do that. You don't hire strictly based on skin color. That's nuts. I mean, that's literally a federal crime. And so employees at Red Hat reported these violations, and Red Hat not only ignored them, they deleted them. Like, I have screenshots where they went through and purged from their anonymous ethics reporting system. They just went through and deleted all of them because they didn't want a track record of them. It's crazy. Now, the result of all that is lawsuits galore. We've got lawsuits against IBM, lawsuits against Red Hat, including a lawsuit against IBM by the state of Minnesota, or the state of Missouri, sorry. So we have government agencies filing lawsuits against IBM and against Red Hat for exactly the sort of thing that these people are coming out, and these employees of Google and Apple and Microsoft and Intel are coming out and speaking about right now. It's bonkers. It's crazy good in a way to finally see people feeling either fed up enough or comfortable enough to be able to speak out about this. I wish people could have sooner, but I kind of understand why they didn't, right? So many people, if they speak out, they're afraid they're going to lose their job. Or they're afraid that not only will they lose their job, but they'll get blacklisted, which is a very real thing. If you speak out, let's say you're an Apple employee and you speak out about these racist hiring practices at Apple, and it becomes public knowledge that you speak out against them, well, how likely are you to get hired at Google or Intel or Microsoft or Red Hat or IBM or any of the other myriad of other big tech companies that also employ the exact same hiring practices? right? They're not going to hire you because they're going to be afraid of getting in trouble, of having more whistleblowers and lawsuits happening because they do the exact same illegal, immoral, unethical, racist hiring practices. But now people are speaking out, and it needs to happen, right? We have to rip this Band-Aid off right now. If you have seen anything like this, speak out. And if you're worried about having your name attached to it, the Lunduke Journal can help publish any sort of leaked or whistleblowery material from inside these big tech companies or foundations if you work with us on it. We can do so while protecting your identity. If you go to lunduke.com, at the bottom of that page, there is a Become a Tech Whistleblower link that will walk you through how to set up one of many ways. You can set up an anonymous email account, how you can protect your identity, how you can send files, including very large files, anonymously to the Lunduke Journal, and how we can work to scrub any metadata or any personally revealing information as we publish it. So if you want to get the story out there and you've seen things, if you've experienced the discrimination or just observed and witnessed the discrimination, speak out. If you can't feel comfortable speaking out with your name attached, I understand. You have to be able to be employed and put food on the table and support your family, and you don't want to get fired because you work at Intel and have seen some crazy things, but you still want to get that information out there. So go to lunduke.com, click Become a Whistleblower link, and I can walk you through that process. This is going to continue. This is January 1st of 2025, the first day of the new year, and we're kicking it off with people speaking out, people finding their voice and speaking out against the racism and the inherent discrimination that's happening so rampantly within big tech, and that gives me a little glimmer of hope for what we will see over the course of the next year. Between that and all of the lawsuits that are pending against IBM, Red Hat, and others, it's going to be a crazy year. And thank you to all of the Lunduke Journal subscribers. Go to lunduke.com. There's links all over the page for where to watch and where to listen. You can find the Lunduke Journal just about everywhere. We're on X and Rumble and Facebook and YouTube and Patreon and Locals, and there's iTunes and Substack and Spotify. We're friggin' everywhere. The Lunduke Journal is everywhere and has eyes everywhere. So thank you to all the subscribers that make it possible for us to do this without any big tech money, without any advertiser money. We don't take a dime from anyone except for you. So that means no one can cancel us and no one can shut us down. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, nerds and nerdettes across this inner tube of ours, I do declare, end broadcast.